I built this gaming computer for $170 and it can run games like Fortnite, Rainbow Six, and more. Let's see what I did to build this. I'm Yams from PC Flipping Central. For those who are new, we're a YouTube channel dedicated to flipping computers, meaning we take old computer parts and build them into full desktop computers to sell for a profit. I flip PCs often, but only make videos on a few that I do. So why is this computer in specific special enough to get a YouTube video? Well, a few days ago I was asking in our Discord server about pricing. I wanted some opinions on how much I could sell this computer for. Here's how the conversation went. Price check selling, I think I could get $250 to $300 out of it. Thoughts?
Bro, what?
Well, that thing won't even boot up Roblox, and you're asking $230.
I mean, it's not going to run ray tracing or anything, but it can definitely run some light games.
Test some games then.
Alright, Tommy Zombie, Canada, Maple Leaf, Canada. I will. Let's see who's right about this. First of all, the specs. This machine has an Intel Core i7-870 as its processor, a first generation CPU from Intel released back all the way in September of 2009 and based on the Linfield 45nm architecture. That's a whopping 14 years ago. And 45 nanometers is huge compared to the modern day 7 and 5 nanometer processes. It's a hyper-threaded quad-core with a base clock speed of 2.93 GHz and a boost of 3.6 GHz. RAM is just some generic DDR3 clocked at 1333 MHz, and there's 12 GB of it. The graphics card in question is NVIDIA's GTX 760, released in 2013 and boasting an immense VRAM pool of 2 whole gigabytes. This card is sure to bring the heat. Other parts include a 250 GB SSD, 550 watt power supply, Intel brand motherboard, generic RGB cooler, and the case is the Blue Gears B-Vigor RGB. I'll throw the prices up on the screen, but this build totaled $170. Jokes aside, this is not the greatest price I could have paid for this build, and if you want to build something similar, shoot for under $150. Let's get to testing some games and see if this ancient relic can actually hold up to some modern gaming. I want to preface that MSI Afterburner did not work in many of these games. Maybe the age of the build was showing through, but you're just going to have to take my word here and watch the Steam FPS counter up in the top left. First game to test, of course, is Roblox. Let's see if Tommy Zombie Canada Maple Leaf Canada had a valid claim. Oh, look at that. Interesting results. Here's even proof of the hardware before I open the game. In reality though, the Roblox experience here was underwhelming to say the least. It was definitely playable and I had no issues at all other than my own lack of skill going through this obby on a bicycle. There were some noticeable small stutters, however I felt like it didn't impact my experience too much. Lil Nas X here got through the very first 18 minutes with almost no deaths at all. So that's great. Unfortunately, since Afterburner didn't want to work here, I don't have any FPS figures. Next up is going to be some 3D Mark benchmarks. I went ahead and did Time Spy and the CPU test. As you can obviously see, this is real footage, and it was not something that you could even watch. This isn't necessarily bad, as Time Spy is a very intensive stress test, with even some lower end and mid-range computers getting sub 60 frames per second. For Time Spy I got a score of 1632 graphics score and 2431 CPU score. In the CPU test, I got this score that's on screen. Do with this info what you will. I wanted to try out CS2. I have never actually played the game before and I was under the impression that it would basically be the same as CSGO. CSGO ran on like everything, so you can imagine my surprise when CS2 ran at a nice 8 FPS at 1080p low settings. Well, no worries, I thought. Units go to 720p. Yeah, no, same results. I was very confused as to why it was running so bad. Even when I looked up the minimum requirements, I was confused. According to Steam, the minimum requirements are an i5-750 and a 1GB DirectX 11 GPU. In other words, pretty much anything should be able to run this. According to some websites though, the recommended specs are an RTX 2070 and an i7-9700K. Although I'm skilled enough to massacre a couple bots at Google Slides pacing, you probably aren't. So Counter-Strike 2 will be labeled as unplayable. Womp womp. With such a heartbreaking defeat playing CS2, I decided to try out some games that were more up to this PC's speed. Since the GTX 760 was released in 2013, I booted up Mirror's Edge, which is a 2008 parkour game that I absolutely adore. Pretty easy to say that this game ran perfectly. Even at the highest settings with decently high anti-aliasing, I was easily getting over 60 FPS. All settings could be cranked on this game and still result in great frames per second, no doubt. In fighting scenes, outdoor areas, and anything else there was no stuttering to be recognized, or at least I didn't feel any. Average FPS was 61, with the 1% low being 31, and the 0.1% low being 11. In the midst of trying some older games, I went ahead and tested Tomb Raider, which was released in 2013, the same year as this graphics card. I didn't play the game, but instead ran the in-game benchmark. At 1080p medium settings, I got 141 FPS average, and at ultra settings, I got 76.5 FPS average. I'm not sure what I was expecting, as this was a mid-range card back in 2013, so no problem at all running these games. Speaking of Tomb Raider, I also tried Shadow of the Tomb Raider. This game was released in 2018, and its minimum requirements say that we should be able to run it in theory. I decided to run the in-game benchmark at 1080p, 900p, and 720p respectively, all at low settings. MSI Afterburner must have been on that nut pack here, because at 1080p my average FPS was 16, but that display in the top left says otherwise. It's pretty easy to see from the footage that 16 FPS was the true average though. At 900p I got a huge improvement to a shocking 20 FPS. And at 1360 by 768 pixels, I got 22 FPS. Definitely unplayable, and I thought we'd be able to run this game at lower settings. My settings are showing up on screen, but yeah, not sure if I did something wrong or the computer just couldn't do it. I'm sure we'd get even better results if maybe I turned off volumetric lighting or something, but I don't know. Next up is everyone's favorite, Fortnite. I went ahead and did 1080p with medium-ish settings for the most part here and hopped into a no-builds game. At the start there were some very heavy stutters, but that was most likely due to the textures loading in. As I got into the game there were still some stutters, but we were getting around 60 to 80 FPS and sometimes even up to 90 or 100 depending on the area. I decided to cap it at 60 FPS later, and I'm very happy. It helped a ton with the stuttering. Very playable experience here. Finally, I decided to test Rainbow Six Siege, an esports title that I feel a lot of people looking for a gaming PC would like to try out. This was easy peasy to run. Not a lot to say here. 115 average FPS at 1080p with a mixture of medium and high settings. All I had to watch out for was to not go over the VRAM limit. No stutters, and the game ran really great. So overall, this machine performed really well in the games it could run, and extremely poorly in the games that it couldn't. It is still a good machine for older games and some esports titles, as we saw here, but newer AAA games are going to be out of the question. I plan on listing this computer for $250, but we'll see how it goes. If you guys have any questions or comments, go ahead and type them down below or head over to the description and join our Discord server. Make sure to subscribe for more PC flipping content. Once again, I'm Yams, and I'll see you in the next video.